What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. It is time to give you a recap of week number 8 of the 2024 college football season. Kind of a quiet weekend in terms of upsets. I mean, we did see some upsets here and there. The two SEC games, those were upsets there. Tennessee upsetting Alabama. What a great finish to that game. Georgia dominating Texas. That was a game that we probably didn't see coming, being expected to be a double-digit win for Georgia, but it was just a quiet weekend. Now, we did see some close calls. We did see some close upsets, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But I'm going to give you a recap here of week number 8, give you my 5 biggest recaps here from week number 8 as the second half of the 2024 season gets officially underway. So let's go ahead and get into these 5 biggest recaps. We'll start from the bottom and work our way up to the top. So we'll start here with my number 5 biggest recap. Not a big recap here, but Indiana is for real. I think that was really clear, from yesterday afternoon when they defeated Nebraska 56-7. Boy, oh boy, what a blowout this was. An ugly game here for Nebraska, the worst game that they've played all year long. Nebraska has not looked like the same team since they beat, Colorado in week number 2, and, they're not the same team that we kind of expected, to be like a dark horse team in the Big Ten and everything, but I think Nebraska, you can definitely put them out of that conversation. Indiana, though, we're talking about them. They are for real. This is a team in the offseason I think was going to be very underrated, but I did not expect them to be 7-0 at this point. Indiana comes out of a bye week, I believe, from this past weekend. So, yeah, they had a bye week before playing this game, and it looks like the bye week really paid off, and they also had a home field advantage. I did talk about this game in the Upset Alert video and also my game picks. I picked Nebraska to win this game, but Indiana just proved me wrong. It seems like when Indiana kind of gets into these big games, everybody just thinks they're going to really lose because, this was their kind of first real test against a very talented Nebraska team. But no, they went in there and just blew out Nebraska down into the drain. This game was not even close to begin with at the start of the game. Now, it was tied at 7-all, but then after Indiana went up 28-7, yeah, it was definitely over from there. Indiana's offense is very explosive. We just know that already. And then the defense is just going to get better and better. Now, Indiana, I don't think they're on the level of Ohio State, Oregon, or Penn State. I mean, they still got Michigan coming up on the schedule and also Ohio State. But I think they have a great shot to beat Michigan, to be honest. They get that game at home. They have to play the Buckeyes on the road, but that might be the only loss that Indiana has this year. And if they go 11-1, win out for the rest of the year, after maybe losing to Ohio State, this Indiana team, I'm telling you, we could see them in the Big Ten championship. And then also, if Penn State maybe slips up somewhere, the Hoosiers could get in, and they could probably match up against Ohio State or Oregon. But I think it's going to be really hard for Ohio State to lose a game, and then same thing goes for Oregon. Maybe Indiana doesn't get in there, but this Indiana team, I don't think they'll have enough of a resume to probably, get into the playoff, but we never know. So Indiana, they are for real just after this dominating beatdown on Nebraska, 56-7. Really not much to take away from the Big Ten this weekend. It was a kind of a quiet week. I know Oregon won on Friday night against Purdue 35-0, but Ohio State and Penn State did not play this weekend, so there was not really much to talk about in the Big Ten Conference, but Indiana is for real. That's my number 5 biggest recap. All right, number 4, we go to the Big 12. Similar game, similar finish, and similar score. I know this is not a big recap here, but it's also pretty similar here between both of the teams that are still undefeated in the Big 12. Iowa State and BYU both had similar games, similar finishes, and similar scores over the weekend. They both won 38-35 respectively over their opponents. BYU won on Friday night against Oklahoma State. What a great game and what a finish to that game. BYU gets a late score to win the game, and same thing for Iowa State last night. They defeated UCF. It looked like UCF was going to win this game, but Iowa State does survive. They get the rushing touchdown. So, yeah, we saw a similar game, similar finish, and similar scores here between the two undefeated teams here in the Big 12. I don't think any of these teams play each other in the regular season, if I'm not mistaken, but these two teams are still undefeated in the Big 12, and I did talk about these two teams last week in a recap video. I did say that could we see BYU and Iowa State in the Big 12 championship? I mean, that's what it really is looking like right now. We saw Utah lose to TCU last night, so I think they're pretty much out of it. Same thing with Oklahoma State. They haven't won a conference game just yet, but The Big 12 is crazy. You know, we've seen a lot of great games this year, and you know, this was a similar game, similar finish, and similar scoring here for both of these games. You know, Iowa State defeats UCF 38-35. Same thing with BYU. They defeated Oklahoma State on Friday night 38-35, and they were both similar games. You know, it looked like both of these teams were going to lose their first game of the season, but they both survived against like 3-3 opponents. And I did put both of these teams on upset alert. You know, when it comes to like these Big 12 games, they're really hard to predict, and they're going to be really competitive. There's no question about it. And both of these teams are just going to beat up on each other, and that's the case with the Big 12. A lot of these teams have beaten up on each other, of course, over the weekend. You know, Texas Tech and Arizona State, they lost, so they have lost now 2 games this year. They could still make it in, but, you know, I feel like Iowa State and BYU, that's what the Big 12 championship is looking like right now. That's the matchup that we're looking at right now because both of these teams are undefeated, and they haven't lost a conference game. Now, don't count out Kansas State just yet. They defeated West Virginia on the road last night, beat them 41-18. So, yeah, Kansas State is not out of it just yet. I think these are the front runners right now, BYU, Iowa State, and Kansas State. But we got 2 undefeated teams left standing in the Big 12, and these are the 2 teams. Iowa State and BYU both surviving yesterday in similar game, similar finish, and similar score. And like I said, it was a similar game. They had a great finish. It was a game-winning touchdown, similar finish with the touchdown, and then, of course, similar score. It was 38-35 in both of these games. So not a big recap here, but I did want to mention these 2 games and give Iowa State and BYU credit, and congratulations to them winning another great game and also a really close game. But they remain undefeated. They're both 7-0 heading into the start of the second half of the season. So I got BYU and Iowa State here, my number 4 biggest recap. Similar game, similar finish, and similar score. So that's my number 4 biggest recap. Let's now go to number 3. Miami continues to be the top team in the ACC. Boy, how about this game? Miami and Louisville yesterday afternoon to start off the college football Saturday, and it did not disappoint. What a great game it was. It was a shootout, 52-45. Miami gets the win, though. Miami, you know, felt like they had control in the first half, but Louisville kept fighting hard in this game. There's no question about it. You know, Louisville just could not stop this Miami offense, and the defense just really struggled to stop Cam Ward from getting plenty of time to throw the football. And Cam Ward has to be a Heisman candidate. There's no question about it. He threw 4 touchdowns in this game. He's got to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And still, I don't understand why Cam Ward is like number 2 in the NFL's top 5 quarterback list and Shedeur Sanders is first. Look, I know Shedeur Sanders is really good, but Cam Ward has shown us that he can escape from pressure, he can throw on the run, and he can find his receivers downfield. And defenses give Cam Ward plenty of time to throw the football. So, yeah, Miami continues to be the top team in the ACC. They're still undefeated. It's not really just about the record. It's about the talent on this team. This team is just very good. We've kind of learned that ever since the start of the season after they beat Florida and everything. But, yeah, this Miami team is for real. They continue to be the top team in the ACC. Looking at the other ACC games over the weekend, we saw Clemson beat Virginia 48-31. So you're looking at that score, and maybe you're saying, wow, Clemson could have done a lot better. Yeah, I think they could have done a lot better, but Clemson is still a very talented team. Pittsburgh had a bye week. You know, they're still undefeated. They're not the only undefeated team. Miami's not the only undefeated team in the ACC. You can't count out Pittsburgh just yet. We saw NC State defeat Cal on the road. Yeah, that was a big shocker there. You know, Cal is not looking like a really good team now. NC State's looking like they've gotten a little bit better. Virginia Tech defeated Boston College 42-21. I believe it was on a Friday night. And then Duke. How about Duke beating Florida State 23-16? Boy, Florida State just continues to fall apart. And then SMU, don't count out SMU just yet. They are still right there in the ACC race, and they could still make it to the conference championship. SMU, I don't think, has lost a conference game just yet. Same thing with Miami and Pittsburgh. Duke just continues to get better as well. So, yeah, the ACC just continues. You know, we're seeing some teams get better and better, but yeah, Miami is definitely still the top team in the ACC, and they're still likely to make it to the ACC championship. And the schedule kind of sets up the rest of the way really well for Miami. They got past this test against Louisville. They still got to play Florida State, which I don't think it will be a tough game whatsoever. And they still got to play Georgia Tech. That Georgia Tech game looked like it was going to be a tough one, but after Georgia Tech lost to Notre Dame, I feel like that game probably couldn't be even close whatsoever. But you never know. Miami lost to them last year. They probably could slip up in that game, and that game, of course, will be on the road. But I got Miami here. That is my number 3 biggest recap. They beat Louisville 52-45, and they continue to be the top team in the ACC, and Cam Ward just continues to be that really good quarterback in the country. So let's now get into my top 2 recaps here from week number 8. We'll start here with number 2. Georgia is still Georgia. That was made clear pretty much last night here by the Bulldogs. We had the biggest game over the course of the weekend. We actually had back-to-back really good games of the weekend. You know, we had Oregon and Ohio State in Week 7, but we get Georgia and Texas here. And this game actually wasn't even that close. You know, both teams made a lot of mistakes in this game. We'll start with Georgia first. They're still Georgia. This defense looks like it's come alive. You know, the defense, of course, has been the kind of big story under Kirby Smart and everything. It kind of took a little time for Georgia's defense to get better as the season went along, and that kind of is the case here with Georgia in the last few years. It takes their defense a little bit of time to kind of get things like figured out. The first half of the season, they really couldn't get things figured out, but it seems like in the second half, Georgia's got a pretty dangerous defense going into the rest of the season. I think that will be the case here for Georgia. They really just showed us how dominant they can be on the defensive side of the football. And Kirby Smart really does call the plays. I mean, Kirby Smart's defensive background gives Georgia definitely a dangerous defense the rest of the way. I mean, offensively, Georgia looked really sluggish in this game. Now, they did get a few touchdowns. You know, Trevor Etienne was the only playmaker, in my opinion, of running the football for Georgia. But we saw Carson Beck really struggled in this game. Didn't have a touchdown pass, but he did make enough plays to not let his team lose and everything. Georgia does survive in this one. And also, Carson Beck threw 3 picks in this game, which is really unacceptable. But a win's a win for Georgia, even with all the mistakes they made. Now, they did force the turnovers on the Texas offense, and Texas offense just really could not get past this Georgia defense. That was the difference there. Georgia was just forcing turnovers. They pressured Quinn Ewers, and then Arch Manning came in there a little bit at times, but yeah, they just put the pressure on these quarterbacks, and Georgia just showed how dominant they can be, and they're still Georgia. They're the Georgia team that we expected in the preseason to be really good on the defense. The offense, maybe not as good as it was last year, but, the running game is just really good with Trevor Etienne in there. Trevor Etienne just played lights out in this game, so yeah, Georgia is still Georgia. They're still that dominant team in the SEC that's won back-to-back national championships, and they are the team that, definitely is the dominant team and the dominant program in the 2020s. So yeah, Georgia is still Georgia. That's my number 2 biggest recap. But let's now go to number 1, the most important recap here from week number 8 of the 2024 college football season, and that is still in the SEC. The SEC is now wide open. I think that's really clear now. You got Texas that just lost their first game of the season, and then also their first conference game. Now, Texas A&M, the Aggies have not lost a conference game just yet, so they're probably first place right now in those standings, but every team has lost one game in the regular season. Yeah, the SEC is wide open. This is one of the best SEC races that I think we've had, pretty much in the history of college football. It's wide open. A lot of these teams are going to beat up on each other. It's just like the Big 12. The Big 10 is kind of what we expected it to be. The ACC is pretty much controlled by Miami and Clemson and then Pittsburgh and all those other teams. But yeah, the SEC is now wide open. Boy, how about Tennessee and Alabama? What a finish to this game. Tennessee getting the win 24-17. It looked like, Alabama was going to win this game. They had control pretty much of this entire game, but Tennessee's defense was the difference in this one. I feel like Tennessee's defense came alive in that first half, and then same thing goes for the second half. Nico Amaliaba made some really better throws in the second half. Alabama just kept putting the pressure on him, and then Dylan Sampson, of course, made the difference as well. Dylan Sampson's got to be one of the best running backs in the SEC, in my opinion. Had 3 rushing touchdowns, I believe, in this, or 2 rushing touchdowns, I should say. Nico threw a touchdown pass, so it's Dylan Sampson, 17 rushing touchdowns on the year. Again, he's got to be one of the best running backs in the country, and definitely in the SEC conference as well. But yeah, Tennessee gets the win over Alabama, and you got Georgia that beat Texas last night. Texas A&M kind of had a really sluggish game against Mississippi State on the road. They only won that game like 34-24, but either way, a win's a win. And then Missouri, how about them struggling against Auburn? You know, they had to come back from 14 down. How about South Carolina blowing out Oklahoma? I mean, who saw that coming? South Carolina beating Oklahoma on the road 32-9, I believe was the final score. And then you had Florida beat Kentucky last night 48-20, and then Vanderbilt surviving against Ball State. So yeah, the SEC is just really wide open. That's all you can really say about it. We've seen some great games this year in the SEC. We've seen some upsets at times. Vanderbilt upsetting Alabama, LSU beating Ole Miss. Yeah, this SEC race is going to be a lot of fun here in the second half of the season. And I tell you what, any SEC team can make the SEC championship, and then same thing goes for the college football playoff as well. So yeah, the SEC is now clearly wide open. That is my number one biggest recap. So those are my 5 biggest recaps, and that is my Week 8 recap here of the 2024 college football season. We get the second half of the season underway. I think it's going to be a really exciting season for the rest of the way, and especially in the SEC, and we'll see what the other conferences can do as well. But that's my Week 8 recap. Give me your thoughts about these 5 biggest recaps, and give me your thoughts. What did you think about Week 8 down in the comments below? Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.